Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and we are gathering to talk about Metaphor ReFantazio. I've been waiting a long time for this one, and I got one question for you. Is it really that good? You already know the answer. All right, look, we got a 93 over on Metacritic, looking hot over there. Million copies sold. Fastest selling Atlas game yet. That record was set earlier this year by Persona 3 Reload. They took a week to do that. All Metaphor needed was a day, man. Crazy. And then also on top of that, the Steam player count is nuts. So a lot of people are going cuckoo for Metaphor ReFantazio. And for me, I am as well. Persona 5 Royal is the reason I became a game developer. So stepping into this game, I was like, let the imposter syndrome set in. I gotta see what the chefs at Atlas are cooking. Of course, before we begin, a shout out to Atlas West for sponsoring today's video. Really didn't have to twist my arm for this one, but hey, I'm a big Atlas fanboy. I've talked about their stuff for years across this channel and Retro Rebound, so I was happy to sit down with Metaphor ReFantazio and just talk about my time with the game so far. I have about 10 hours in the game. I'm just like, oh my god, dude. It's so good. It's so freaking good. Easy game of the year contender. I gotta start by talking about the story. For me, when it comes to the story with Atlas games, there are many things, but one that's always consistent is it's about the themes and the commentary that they pack into their world and into their characters. And so this story has much to say about how fiction impacts the real world. And I just want to pause there for a moment before I get a little bit deeper. For me, fantasy games, hit or miss. Like, there's just particular wrinkles within certain fantasy experiences. I think of an Elder Scrolls with its open world experience that just calls me in a little bit more, where I'm not a major fantasy fan otherwise, like I am with sci-fi, where anything sci-fi just yanks me in because I just love everything sci-fi. But fantasy, there's more particular wrinkles, and this is one of them with Metaphor, is the commentary on how fiction impacts us, and in turn how it impacts us determines the decisions we make in our day-to-day lives. And it's immediately conveyed visually as you learn of this world in a book that the protagonist carries, where people are unified, there is peace. And so there's also more subtle touches for this theme, like the shaders that they use on the character models that give them more of a storybook look and feel to them. But immediately, it stood the chance to create a unique relationship with the player where you're engaging with fiction to escape real-world problems that surround you, as is your main character. And this is something I really haven't seen done before, at least in a video game. And so I thought this was just like a really cool approach to watch my character escape at the same time that I may also be escaping. So I love this, especially because your main character is voiced here. They're more of a character than, say, as a comparison, any prior Persona game where you sort of fill a set of shoes and there is some sort of backstory, but it's more light. This feels more defined. They're more of a set character. And so when you have that element there, it just draws you into them a little bit closer. I play my games, like many, because I view them as art and I wish to see what the creators have to say about the world we're living in. And Atlas isn't really dancing around things here either. Like, your character is an Elda, it's a scarcely seen race, and many who see you avoid any sort of contact. They make offhand comments. For example, a lot of the center point of this story is how a king was assassinated. They're like, the king's assassinated, now there's an Elda in the city. How much worse could it go? Like, you are the sign of bad luck. I just saw this in like an offshoot NPC conversation. I'm like, dang, man, they don't like me at all. And they're just reacting to you based upon an appearance that you can't control. So it's Atlas's ability to go to the dark areas of our world with care, yet being able to dig deep enough to get us to reflect, that makes them such special storytellers. And in Metaphor ReFantazio, all of the tribes are vying for power following the death of said king. And in walks Luis Guillaburn. And this SOB is making it no secret that he will do all it takes to secure the power that he believes is rightfully his, even if it's in broad daylight, even if it's kind of controversial. He's just going to step out there, do his thing, and secure the power if that's what it takes. Like, this guy stops at nothing. And immediately they establish a very clear villain character who remains consistent throughout the story, at least thus far, which I really liked about this game, because I feel like in prior Atlas games, it's about your party, and this game manages to sort of bleed the two together, where you see that it's still a big focus on your party and developing those characters, but that the villain character is frequently appearing or characters attached to him. So they've done a really good job handling the villain character to introduce things thus far. But knowing Atlas games, this is the hand behind the back here. And Luis probably isn't the main villain, but at least the starter villain. Just, again, I've played so many of their games that I know there's got to be a twist somewhere in this. The other thing I urge fans who are new to Atlas games to pay attention to is the naming convention. Naming conventions are everything in their games, down to, say, the main enemy types in this game, which are humans. So the ugliest part of this world are the humans, and they're talking about them like they're monsters. Ring a bell? Like, come on, man. It's just, again, it's so simple, but it's so brilliant to me. So as you're playing this game, pay attention to how they name things, because there's always another layer beneath it. It's like an onion. But Atlas's storytelling isn't just in text and voice work alone, which the voice work, by the way, oh my God, so good. Especially because the actors and actresses feel refreshingly new. It's not like really any voices I have felt like I have heard recently, just so different from their prior games in that regard. But their storytelling is so good in the style they present it in, the screen wipes, the transitions. Like, for example, I always say this, but people never think about it. Atlas games have a ton of loading screens. They have a ton of them, but they do such a good job at hiding them that your immersion is never broken. So let's say you're walking around the city, you go from one area to the next, and then there's a loading screen of your character kind of walking through the city where my immersion isn't broke at all. Or in combat, like you start a battle and you see this kind of close-up animated portrait of your character that then transitions into the fight itself. Or when the fight's over, you see this eye appear and you kind of zoom into it, and then it's an overhead shot of your character slowly walking. Like, there's a sense of style, and then it screen wipes one more time and you're back in the world where you had first began said fight. Like, it's just seamless in everything from combat to storytelling, where it's never just giving you a blank screen to look at. There's always something happening. And of course, the Atlas menu work just speaks for itself. When you look at what they've done here with this game, I mean, just slipping and sliding through these menus, it's insane, the level of details. Like, it's just brilliant. You can look for details all day in their games. Like, the amount of frames packed into the animation of their menus, and just how great of a job they do looping certain animations and shaders and all that stuff. It's just, it's brilliant. It's art, dude. It's so good. So I know I could go on and on and on about stories, and I'm sure as I play more of it, I will. But yeah, just on like an art level, I just feel these are the games I play games for now, where I can just continue to extract more and more messaging, more and more meaning, because it compounds as you learn more about these characters, you learn more about this world, you just start to see deeper meaning in everything across the game. Like I mentioned, it's menus, it's worlds, it's NPCs, it's writing, early moments and foreshadowing. It's so brilliantly done, man. It's so good. But what I want to also talk about is the gameplay, because I was really curious, like, what is Metaphor going to do to kind of honor the Persona style gameplay it's clearly marketed, while also making it feel different? And again, this is about the unique wrinkles that they've introduced into this gameplay formula. So what you have here is the tried and true social gameplay at the heart of this experience, but the way they've paced it out, I think, will be to many people's benefit. Also, a lot of people are looking at this game as sort of a good entry point, like, oh, there's a ton of Persona games, which you can start at any point, and I would recommend you do that. But many people are looking at Metaphor as like, oh, is this a more mature version of Persona? And I feel like that is a okay way to look at it, because you do get a lot of blood in this. You do get a lot of dark themes in this. Like, they do dive pretty deep here, whereas some people just can't get into the idea of, say, playing as like a high school character, which I understand and respect. But when you look at the social gameplay here, like, what separates you going to school versus you trying to become a king, basically? Well, as you'd expect, you have social stats here. In this case, they're your royal virtues. So you have your wisdom, courage, your tolerance, your eloquence, and your imagination. And as you'd expect, you're going to go around completing certain activities. You're going to go cooking. You're going to people watch. You're going to listen to stories, and much more as time passes on. Now, speaking of time passing, as you would expect, when you complete any of these activities, time itself will pass. There will be two phases of the day, in daytime and nighttime, and certain activities will only be available, or people will only be available at certain points throughout the day. But the challenge with the social gameplay is always how to you as the player manage it, because you typically have a ticking clock, like, oh, you have 9 days until this thing is happening, and if you don't have this dungeon done by this point, then it's game over. So you have to factor in that, while also maximizing your social stats, getting all the gear you need, maybe completing a few side quests to get some money to then spend it on new gear, whatever it may be. And so the new layer here that I love is adding another complexity to that social management. So now there are characters in this world that'll give you requests and side quests. Some of them are tied to actual characters' storylines, and they'll unlock whole new dungeons. So that's already cool into itself. Like, go over here to this cave. There's this boss here that we need you to take out, something along those lines. So they can send you out there, but there's time spent traveling. And so number one, when you commit to going out there, it better be worth it, right? It's got to be worth it. If you're going all that length, you're spending the time. That means that you're not doing other social activities maybe you could have done. So you have to make sure you're fully ready for it. And the game provides good mechanics to allow you to be ready for that. Like, you can go to an informant and buy information on the dungeon and find out like what they're weak to and prepare your archetypes, which we'll talk about in a moment, to kind of get ready for said dungeon. So yeah, like, they kind of give you the tools to manage how you want. And for experts of, say, Persona, like, you're going to be right in your bag here. You're going to be right in your comfort zone because it's that new layer on top. For new players coming in, this is going to be a lot to manage because now you have this new layer of like travel time and then dungeon time and then going back. And some things take longer to get to than others. So you have to factor that in. So the social gameplay is brilliant still, and they just continue to add layers to it. Like, as you progress with your followers, you're going to unlock new mechanics. You're going to unlock new archetypes through these followers as well. So let's talk a bit about that with the combat. So the archetypes are what I would define as a job system. Many people are looking at it as like, oh, these are your personas. And I guess they kind of remind you of that, especially since the button input to summon them is the same as it was in, say, Persona 5. But this is very much a job system. Like, so much so that I unlocked a merchant archetype and I was like, what? They even have that here? Which is really cool to see. But there are your typical ones like your mage, your warrior, a seeker, and then you have like deeper cuts, like you'll get a merchant, for example. And I just thought this was really cool to see because what they do here in Metaphor is, unlike Persona, where you're more confined to only, say, Joker in Persona 5 can change out his personas, and then everyone else has preset ones. Everyone can mix and match their archetypes. So pretty much you can put jobs on anyone that changes their equipment, their damage, their defense. And what's also encouraged is this is, think of it like a piece of equipment. You're going to change this out depending on certain boss fights. There was one I went through in a dungeon, and this boss in particular got really mad if they saw someone with a staff. So if you were a mage or a healer, they were going to have this special move that would show up and do a lot of damage to you, get bonus turns on you, and it was awful. So it forced me to switch from the mage to the knight instead, and because I had that, I also was able to target certain weaknesses. Now, on top of that, you can also inherit skills from different archetypes. So this allows you to say, well, I want to be a healer because that makes sense for this fight, but I need some sort of offensive capability. Oh, this enemy I got intel is weak to wind spells. I'm going to inherit a wind spell skill. And that is the strategy where you're really preparing for these fights much more than any prior Atlas game. I also just love messing with the archetypes because that means you get to go to Academia. And when you go to Academia, you get to hear the beautiful music there. I mean, the music in this game is still warming up on me. Like, it's really good, but it's very different. I'm used to Shoji Megaro's more poppy kind of feel from Persona, and this is still really high quality stuff, but I'm still finding the music that's catching my ear and sticking with me, and Academia's theme is absolutely one of those. It almost feels like I'm in a church listening to it. It's really good though. And that is as expected with Shoji Megaro's music, but here in particular, it's a different style, a different muscle he's flexing, and you can really feel the expansiveness of his talent because it's really good. Like, the amount of times fights would begin and a certain track would kick in and I would get goosebumps just from watching everyone on screen and like all the art. Like, it just provides this feeling that very few games can do for me. And it's hard to really put into words. I'm a motor mouth, but it's hard for me to put into words. Like, when a game brings that out of you, or any experience brings that out of you, you know you've got something special there. And it's not going to be the same for everyone. I love these types of games deeply, so I know it's going to bring a lot more out of me. But man, like, it is a powerful combination, and this music is a big piece of that puzzle. But I'm getting away from the combat. So this is still the turn-based combat you know and love from Atlas, but it does have an action element in that you're running around these dungeon spaces, and you'll be able to attack enemies and weaken them down. I will admit right now with the mage, I am having trouble in that you really get like this small radius attack where it feels better with, say, melee, where you can really sweep and dodge roll. But when you're a mage, you kind of lock yourself down. I've been using the mage archetype a ton because I've really enjoyed just the flexibility of spells is the easiest way to target weaknesses. And the way that mana can regen with the mage class makes it a lot more appealing than, say, using spells in Persona where you really had to just be super careful with your MP. You still do in this game. It's a game, again, about management of resources across the board. But when it comes to metaphor and the action elements, they're just to set up the turn-based combat. So you're going to attack an enemy. Once they're in a weakened state, it'll literally freeze time. Like, you're not going to finish them off with melee attacks. It's going to freeze time. You press Y and you jump into a battle. Some new elements here that I've seen thus far. One is that you can reset the battle anytime you want. So if you jump into a fight and like you just get joked by a critical miss, and because of that the enemy slaps you in the face and now you have no health and you're going to use up a bunch of resources that you'd rather not to, you can obviously choose not to do this and just roll with the challenge, but you can also reset the battle and try again at any point in time if you'd like to. In fairness, Persona is a little easier, particularly Persona 5. I think Metaphor has found itself in a good pocket. I've been playing it on hard, and it is, well, hard. Like, I'm pretty sure enemies get a bonus action. They get some sort of bonus on the hard difficulty. So you are fighting an uphill battle, and it will definitely increase your play clock because these fights are going to be much tougher. I did test it on normal as well, just to see how that fares. And what I noticed is you definitely can get the edge on your opponents pretty quickly, but they hit you still very hard, where it has a little bit more of the SMT difficulty in it, where you can get on a roll and trick yourself into thinking you're winning, but all it takes is one turn for the enemy to put you back on your heels and for you to just quickly try to figure out, like, how do I heal? How do I maintain this momentum? Like, the game just constantly pushes you back on your heels on both those difficulties. I don't know if that continues into the late game where you really get, say, powerful archetypes and options at your fingertips, but from what I saw here, this is something that is a little bit more difficult than what we got in Persona, which I think is a great thing there. That was one of the critiques of Persona for many people. Also, what's new here are synthesis skills. I love this because it means that you get very unique combinations on your team. So it's not just about, hey, what archetype works for my character, but what works for other characters, because you can activate these skills and team up with said characters to do devastating damage. Pretty much it's a move that can change the tide of a battle, but you can do these frequently. Like, they just cost MP. You can do them every turn. So I love how incentivized you are to use them. It felt like this special thing, and it is this special thing, but usually they're like, oh, you have to spend a certain resource to do that, or it's going to wipe out all your MP. But this, at least in the early game, pretty cool just how frequently I can deploy this tactic. There's also frontline and backline. This reminds me a little bit of Lost Odyssey. So like if you're frontlining, you're going to do a lot more melee damage, but your defense lowers. If you're backline, you're going to do not as much melee damage, but you're going to take less damage. And so typically you'll throw your mages to the backline instantly. Like, my player character is always on the backline because I'm a mage. There's no reason for me to be up front. I'm not melee attacking. But what this does unlock is really good strategic options of just when you want to back up, when you want to move forward, especially because there are certain attacks that will wipe a whole row. And if you all back up, it's just going to be a miss and a critical miss at that, which allows them to miss a turn and then you get back on the offensive. So there's a level of thought there that I think is deeper than I originally gave it credit for in my preview. But overall, Metaphor ReFantazio from top to bottom is absolutely everything I was hoping for. And what's so funny to me is I'm just scratching the surface. I'm just getting to the tip of what this game can offer, and I am so beyond excited to play more. I've been no-lifing this game whenever I get a chance to do so, and so yeah, I've been loving it. Have you picked it up? Let me know down below. Again, shout out to Atlas West for sponsoring this video. I mean, this is really cool because, like, this is one of my top 3 developers in the industry who's just never missed for me, really. Like, I can't think of an Atlas game I haven't liked. So just really cool to be doing this. So thank you for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts on Metaphor down below. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.